People think becoming emotionless means becoming cold, heartless, or broken. But what if the truth is quieter than that? What if becoming emotionless is not about losing feelings, but about gaining control over which feelings get to control you? Most people are not destroyed by their emotions. They are exhausted by them. The constant reactions, the invisible tug-of-war between what they feel and what they wish they didn't. Becoming emotionless, in its real form, is not emptiness. It is discipline. It is the art of standing inside a storm without letting the storm live inside you. Asterisk. The misunderstanding of becoming emotionless begins with a quiet frustration most people feel, but rarely explain correctly. When someone says they want to become emotionless, they usually don't mean they want to feel nothing. They mean they are tired of being controlled by what they feel. Every disappointment lingers too long. Every insult echoes louder than it should. Every attachment feels risky because caring too much seems to invite pain. The desire to become emotionless is not born from cruelty or emptiness. It is born from exhaustion. It is the mind asking for relief from emotional overload. The problem is that many people misunderstand the solution. They assume the answer is suppression, pushing emotions down, acting cold, pretending not to care. On the surface, this can look like strength. But suppression is not control. It is pressure. Emotions that are forced underground do not disappear. They accumulate. And what accumulates eventually leaks out through irritability, numbness, or sudden reactions that feel out of proportion. Suppression creates fragility disguised as toughness. True emotional control is the opposite. It is not about killing emotion. It is about changing your relationship with it. You are not trying to erase feeling. You are trying to stop feeling from erasing you. Most people grow up treating emotions as instructions. Anger says attack. Sadness says withdraw. Fear says escape. Attraction says chase. These reactions happen so quickly they feel automatic, and over time, automation turns into identity. A person starts to believe, this is just who I am. I'm emotional. I react fast. But what feels like personality is often conditioning. The brain builds shortcuts to save energy. If anger always leads to shouting, the brain wires anger directly to shouting. The shortcut becomes habit. The habit becomes character. Wanting to become emotionless is often a rebellion against these shortcuts. It is the desire for space. Space between trigger and reaction. In that space lives freedom. Without it, emotions own your behavior. With it, emotions become information. The shift from ownership to information is the beginning of mastery. You still feel anger, sadness, excitement, and attachment. The difference is that these feelings no longer dictate your next move. They become signals you can read instead of commands. You must obey. This requires moving from emotional immersion to emotional observation. Immersion means you are inside the emotion with no distance. The feeling becomes your entire perspective. Observation means you notice the emotion as something happening within you. It is present, but it is not the narrator of reality. The difference is like standing in a storm versus watching the storm from shelter. The rain still exists, but it does not drown you. Becoming emotionless in the disciplined sense means building that shelter inside your awareness. You experience emotion without becoming trapped inside it. A common fear appears here. The fear that emotional control will make life dull or artificial. People equate intensity with authenticity. They worry that if they react less, they will feel less alive. But authenticity is not measured by volume. A calm person can feel deeply without displaying every internal wave. In fact, controlled emotion is often more accurate than uncontrolled emotion. Impulsive reactions exaggerate reality. A small mistake feels catastrophic. A minor insult feels like betrayal. Emotional discipline filters distortion. It allows your response to match the actual scale of events instead of the amplified version created by adrenaline. The desire to become emotionless is also tied to vulnerability. Caring exposes you to loss. Attachment exposes you to rejection. Hope exposes you to disappointment. Many people conclude that the safest option is to care less. But emotional avoidance shrinks your world. Emotional discipline expands it. When you trust your ability to survive disappointment, you become braver, not colder. Strength comes from knowing you can feel pain without collapsing, not from pretending pain does not exist. Another crucial realization is that emotions are temporary states, not permanent identities. The mind loves turning moments into definitions. A failure becomes I always fail. A rejection becomes I am unlovable. These conclusions intensify emotion by attaching it to identity. Becoming emotionless requires breaking that fusion. You learn to treat emotions as weather rather than character judgments. Sadness passes through. Anger rises and falls. Fear appears and fades. None of them are final verdicts about who you are. This language matters. When you stop treating emotions as eternal truths, they lose their authority. They become experiences you host instead of rulers you obey. Experiences can be studied, tolerated, and navigated. Rulers demand surrender. Emotional maturity is the refusal to surrender. Authorship of your behavior to temporary chemistry. There is also a social misunderstanding. Many environments reward emotional spectacle. Outrage spreads faster than calm. Dramatic expression attracts attention. People learn that visible intensity functions like currency. Choosing restraint can feel risky because it looks like disengagement. But emotional maturity is often quiet. It prioritizes sustainability over performance. A composed person stabilizes a room instead of feeding chaos. Over time, others begin to trust that steadiness. Calm becomes influence. At its core, the wish to become emotionless is not a wish for emptiness. It is a wish for sovereignty. People want ownership over their inner reactions. They want to stop being dragged by moods they didn't choose. They want the dignity of responding instead of reacting. When you frame the goal as sovereignty instead of numbness, the path becomes constructive. You stop fighting emotion and start studying it. Curiosity replaces resistance. Discipline replaces suppression. This is the real beginning of inner stability. You are no longer trying to escape your emotional life. You are learning to structure it. And structure does not remove feeling. It gives feeling a container strong enough to hold it. Inside that container, emotions still move, but they no longer threaten collapse. They inform you instead of overwhelming you. You set out believing you wanted to become emotionless. What you actually wanted was relief from being controlled. The moment you understand that difference, the journey changes direction. You stop chasing numbness and start building mastery. And mastery is not cold. It is steady. It is the quiet confidence of knowing that emotions can rise without taking you with them. That mastery over your emotional reactions immediately confronts a practical question. How do you interrupt the automatic chain between feeling and reaction? Wanting control is philosophical. Achieving it is mechanical. Every emotion follows a predictable sequence: stimulus, interpretation, sensation, impulse, action. Most people notice only the action. By then, the words are spoken, the door is slammed, or the message is sent. Becoming truly emotionless in the disciplined sense means inserting awareness earlier at the level of sensation or impulse. This is where control is possible. Physical sensations are the body announcing an emotion before the mind constructs a story. Tightening in the chest, heat in the stomach, a rising pulse, these are measurable events. When you detect them early, you catch the emotion in infancy. An infancy is easier to guide than an adult storm of reaction. Naming the emotion is the first step. Quietly label it: anger, frustration, disappointment, anxiety. Naming transforms the surge from a fog into an object. Objects can be examined. Fog can only be endured. This labeling activates analytical brain regions, dampening intensity. It is not suppression. It is translation, converting raw energy into language, introducing structure. Structure slows the speed of emotion. Speed, more than intensity, makes emotions dangerous. Fast emotions outpace judgment. Slowed emotions invite choice. Impulse asks, how do I discharge this immediately? Discipline asks, what response serves me long term? That question is the pivot between temporary relief and durable stability. Pausing and observing also changes posture. You stop leaning forward into reaction and lean back into awareness. Leaning back is not withdrawal. It is perspective. Like a chess player stepping away to view the whole board, you expand your perception. Emotional pausing lets you see context. This conversation is one event in a long relationship. This insult is one moment in a long career. This failure is one interaction in a long life. Context shrinks the emotional spotlight. What felt like a catastrophe becomes a single scene. With the spotlight softened, your response can match reality instead of being hijacked by adrenaline. This pause must be trained under low stakes before it is reliable under high stakes. Many attempt emotional control only in crises: a major argument, a career setback, a personal loss. But the nervous system defaults to habit under stress. Practice is necessary in ordinary moments. Minor annoyances, small delays, brief frustrations. Each time you notice an urge to react and delay by a breath, a habit is being recorded. Over time, delay becomes automatic. What once required conscious force now feels natural. Ironically, you are installing a shortcut toward awareness instead of unconscious reaction, beyond sensation. Interpretation drives emotion. Events do not create feelings alone. Meanings do. Two people receive the same criticism. One feels insulted, the other informed. Automatic interpretations often stem from past experiences. Neutral feedback triggers humiliation if you were repeatedly dismissed. Small mistakes feel catastrophic if blame was frequent in childhood. The emotional brain values pattern recognition over current accuracy. Updating these interpretations is critical. When a strong emotion rises, ask, what assumption is fueling this? Once visible, the narrative is adjustable. The criticism may be clumsy, not cruel. The delay may be circumstantial, not personal. Alternative interpretations weaken certainty. Certainty locks reactions in place. Flexibility softens them. Flexibility allows emotional range. Rigid systems have limited options: attack, retreat, cling, collapse. Flexible systems respond with gradients, express concern without aggression, disappointment without despair, attachment without dependency. These gradients emerge when emotion is treated as a signal, not a command. Nuance softens extremes. Complexity distributes energy. Simplicity concentrates it. Distributed energy is manageable. Concentrated energy feels uncontrollable. Temporal projection enhances control. You imagine evaluating the current reaction tomorrow, next week, next year. Will the words, tone, or actions still feel proportionate? Will they align with the identity you want? This preview exposes short-sighted urges. Short-term discharge often conflicts with long-term integrity. Seeing that conflict reduces the urgency of reaction. Paired with physical regulation, slow breathing, relaxed posture, soft facial muscles, the nervous system receives safety signals, dampening intensity. Emotion is embodied. Body and mind communicate. Adjust one, influence the other. A long exhale lowers anger. A relaxed jaw eases defensiveness. Small micro-adjustments accumulate into calm. At first, this calm may feel strange. Subtle emotions emerge as dramatic highs fade. Life may seem quieter, flatter. The nervous system but nuance reveals richness. Mild contentment, gentle curiosity, subtle connection. These states are less intense, but more sustainable. Sustainability preserves energy. You'll no longer burn yourself out on constant extremes. Emotional independence grows from this stability. Decisions become integrated. You think while feeling instead of reflecting after reaction. Regret diminishes. You no longer apologize to your future self because choices are measured in acceptance without surrender becomes the principle. You acknowledge feelings fully while refusing blind obedience to them. This duality, experiencing without being controlled, is the essence of mastery. Emotions are messengers, not rulers. As discipline stabilizes, identity shifts. You are no longer someone who reacts. Sensitivity becomes perception. You feel deeply but survive fully. The gap created between stimulus and reaction absorbs shock. Interpersonal dynamics improve. Conflicts de-escalate. Situations that once triggered panic now invite reflection. Steadiness is contagious. Others mirror your calm. Emotional mastery is no longer personal armor. It is influence. This refined system transforms the abstract wish to become emotionless into a practical reality. You are not erasing feeling. You are redesigning its flow. Sensations are detected early. Interpretations are adjustable. Impulses are moderated. Responses are deliberate. Emotions still move through you, but they no longer dominate you. With each pause, each observation, each recalibration, the distance between feeling and reaction stops feeling like effort and starts feeling like freedom. The freedom to experience emotion without being drafted into extremes. The freedom to choose your behavior even when chemistry is loud. The freedom to remain yourself in moments that once would have taken you hostage. That freedom changes your relationship not only with emotions themselves, but also with the outcomes that once controlled them. When you can exist inside a feeling without being compelled to react, you notice a hidden truth. Much of emotional turbulence arises not from events themselves, but from your expectations of them. Reality rarely matches the story your mind prepares in advance. When it does, relief feels effortless. When it does not, the surge of frustration, fear, or anger feels disproportionate. Learning to stabilize your emotional state. Despite the gap between expectation and reality is the foundation of disciplined, emotional independence. Most emotional suffering is fueled by a silent, unspoken contract. If conditions go my way, I am safe. If they don't, I am endangered. These contracts are invisible, yet they shape daily experience. A delayed message triggers anxiety. A minor criticism feels catastrophic. A personal setback seems defining. Each situation acts like a lever, pulling your nervous system into extremes. Becoming emotionally disciplined is about renegotiating these contracts. You stop pledging your peace to outcomes you cannot control. You still desire results, but preference replaces dependency. Preference allows disappointment. Dependency demands collapse. This shift requires distinguishing between desire and necessity. A desired outcome is preferable. A necessary outcome feels obligatory for survival. When the mind treats preference as necessity, small failures trigger crises. Reframing outcomes as desirable rather than compulsory allows you to act fully without surrendering stability. The world can resist your plans without toppling your inner state. This is not indifference. It is sovereignty over self. Motivation remains, but it flows from curiosity, discipline, and alignment rather than fear of loss or need for external validation. Dependency is also reinforced through comparison. Social and personal comparisons distort perception. Someone else's success can feel like your failure. Someone else's recognition can feel like your inadequacy. Emotional independence dissolves this external benchmarking. You compare present effort to past effort, your growth to your growth, rather than a constantly shifting scoreboard of others' lives. Internal comparison grounds your emotional state. Growth, being under your control, becomes a reliable measure of value. This prevents envy, frustration, and collapse that arise when self-worth is outsourced to external outcomes. Practicing probabilistic thinking is another tool. Instead of treating preferred results as guarantees, you consider them as likely outcomes among many possibilities. Every interaction, plan, or effort contains uncertainty. By anticipating multiple possibilities, partial success, delay, failure, you inoculate yourself against shock. Surprise amplifies emotion because it collides with certainty. When the mind expects variability, events feel manageable. Emotional spikes shrink, not because the world changes, but because your interpretation does. Reducing attachment to outcomes also builds patience. Many emotional reactions arise from the illusion that time should accelerate to meet desire. Delays create anger. Uncertainty produces anxiety. Emotional discipline reframes time as neutral. You continue acting while results unfold on their own schedule. Patience is active endurance, not passivity. It prevents impulsive decisions made to alleviate temporary discomfort. You no longer trade long-term stability for short-term relief. Brittleness is another consequence of dependency. A brittle emotional system fractures under pressure because all value is concentrated in one point. A result, a relationship, a status. Reducing dependency distributes emotional investment across multiple dimensions: effort, learning, relationships, health, integrity. When one domain suffers, others stabilize the system. Pain becomes informative instead of catastrophic. Emotional equilibrium arises from distributing stakes rather than consolidating them. Detachment does not prevent celebration. Joy, when detached from identity or entitlement, becomes lighter and freer. Success is appreciated as a transient reward, not a permanent validation of worth. Disappointment is experienced without identity collapse. Both extremes are transient moments in a continuum rather than verdicts of self-value. Emotional independence allows full engagement with life without letting highs inflate ego or lows destroy it. As detachment strengthens, courage naturally emerges. When outcomes lose their ability to dictate identity, risk feels tolerable. You can enter uncertainty without paralyzing fear. Courage is not absence of fear, but action despite it. Independence reduces the emotional cost of uncertainty, making aligned, value-driven action easier. Actions are chosen based on principles, not short-term emotional demands. This stage reinforces freedom described in the previous part. You are no longer drafted into extremes by the rise and fall of circumstances. Outcomes influence experience, but no longer own the nervous system. Engagement with life is intentional, not reactive. Standards become internalized. Your behavior is guided by self-defined principles rather than external contingencies. You act consistently, observe without being controlled, and experience emotional presence without surrendering to it at its core. This freedom reveals the original desire behind the wish to become emotionless. People do not want numbness. They want control over themselves. They want to feel without being swept away, to care without collapsing, to experience life without being dominated by fluctuating circumstances. Each step, awareness of sensation, labeling, pausing, probabilistic thinking, detachment strengthens that control. Emotional independence grows cumulatively. Every avoided overreaction, every managed disappointment, every sustained composure adds to internal stability by mastering detachment from outcomes and reducing dependency on external validation. You restructure emotional response. Feelings become messengers, not tyrants. Stimuli become data, not verdicts. Success and failure are contextual, not identity. The nervous system operates in a space of observation, choice, and intentional alignment. Emotional volatility is replaced by calibrated engagement. This is not suppression. It is informed freedom. In this freedom, life becomes navigable rather than chaotic. You maintain empathy without absorption, investment without surrender, and action without compulsion. You no longer react out of fear, expectation, or comparison. You act with clarity, patience, and proportionality. Emotional independence does not sterilize experience. It amplifies meaningful perception. Subtlety, nuance, and balance replace extremes and turbulence. You have arrived at a state where the distance between feeling and reaction stops being effortful and begins to feel. Like liberation, the liberation to experience fully, act consciously, and exist steadily in a world of change. The steadier footing you have developed now allows you to approach real-life situations with deliberate calm. Neutrality is not a passive state. It is active engagement without surrender to emotional extremes. True emotional discipline manifests in the middle of motion, in conversations, conflicts, delays, and disappointments. The test of control is not isolation, but interaction. When the phone call irritates you, when someone crosses a boundary, when life refuses to cooperate, you remain present without escalation. Presence without escalation is operational calm. You experience emotion, but you do not allow it to dictate your behavior. This is where observation becomes power. A key principle here is separating intensity from importance. The body does not measure significance. It measures stimulation. A minor insult, can feel like a major betrayal if it touches a sensitive nerve. Emotional neutrality asks you to evaluate the actual importance of the event. Does it genuinely threaten your values, or is it a momentary inconvenience? Recognizing the distinction prevents disproportionate responses. Intensity is acknowledged. Importance is assessed. One feels, the other decides the scale of response. The mind and body become collaborators rather than adversaries. Description replaces dramatization. A heated email becomes a message with sharp wording. A traffic delay becomes a pause in commute. Simple description strips away exaggerated narrative, which fuels emotion. Dramatization frames events as threats to identity. Description frames them as occurrences to be navigated. Occurrences invite problems. Threats invite defense. Consistently using neutral, precise language creates baseline stability. You become harder to provoke because provocation relies on exaggeration and distorted framing. Tolerance for unfinished emotional cycles strengthens neutrality. Often, emotional spikes result from the urgency to resolve discomfort. Anger, disappointment, and fear feel intolerable until discharged. Practicing neutrality means hosting these emotions without forcing immediate resolution. You allow feelings to exist and dissipate naturally. This endurance expands emotional capacity, the amount of feeling you can manage without panic. Unfinished emotions are not emergencies. They are processes. You remain functional while they unfold. Strategic silence is another tool. Many instinctively match another person's emotional energy. Raised voice with raised voice, accusation with accusation. Neutrality resists that reflex. You respond deliberately at a measured pace, disrupting cycles of escalation. Slow tempo reduces conflict intensity. One deliberate pause can deflate a brewing argument. This asymmetry stabilizes the environment. Others unconsciously mirror your calm rather than inflating tension. Transparency without surrender is critical. Neutrality does not demand hiding feelings. You can acknowledge frustration or disappointment in measured form. I feel frustrated and need a moment to think. This communicates honestly while maintaining composure. Transparency builds trust. Restraint preserves safety. Together, they form a controlled communication style that is both authentic and stabilizing. Emotional control is not secrecy. It is clarity administered with discipline. Interpretation of events is equally important. Many emotional escalations are triggered by projections, anticipating negative outcomes before they exist. Fear, anger, or anxiety often arises from imagined futures rather than present reality. Neutrality redirects focus to verifiable facts. You respond to what is happening now, not to worst-case scenarios. Containment prevents emotional compounding. A single challenge remains proportional instead of multiplying through speculation. Physiological regulation enhances mental neutrality. Breath, posture, and muscle tension influence nervous system activity. Slow, deliberate exhalations signal safety. Relaxed facial muscles reduce defensive feedback. Small physical adjustments cascade into mental calm. The body becomes an ally rather than a trigger for reaction. Over time, automatic responses to stress shift from impulsive to composed, making neutrality habitual rather than forced. Neutrality deepens empathy. Freed from being overwhelmed by your own spikes, you can perceive others' emotions more accurately. Tone, context, and intent become clearer. You can support others without absorbing their turbulence. Boundaries preserve compassion. This counterintuitive fact often surprises people. Distance does not diminish care. It amplifies effectiveness. You can offer stability because you are anchored internally. Recovery from lapses reinforces neutrality. Emotional mastery is not perfection. Occasionally, reactions exceed intention. Neutrality involves recognizing the lapse, correcting course, and returning to balance. Quick recovery prevents temporary missteps from cascading into lasting turbulence. Speed of self-correction matters more than absence of error. Resilience becomes a defining feature. A subtle identity shift accompanies these practices. You no longer see yourself as a collection of reactions. Instead, you become the space in which reactions occur. Contradictions, anger, paired with patience, sadness paired with action, are no longer threatening, but evidence of range. Range prevents rigidity. A flexible system absorbs pressure rather than cracking. Daily life demonstrates the shift. Tone is steady, choices reflect principles, and others notice reliability and composure. Emotional neutrality becomes influence. Your presence stabilizes environments. Finally, emotional richness emerges. When extremes settle, subtler states surface. Mild curiosity, gentle satisfaction, quiet concern. Life does not flatten, it clarifies. Noise is reduced and nuance is amplified. Subtlety replaces spectacle, making contentment sustainable. Emotional neutrality is not a loss of depth. It is the clearing of clutter to perceive life fully. The distance between feeling and reaction ceases to feel effortful. It becomes freedom. Freedom to experience emotion without being drafted into extremes. Freedom to choose your behavior. Freedom to remain yourself in situations that once would have overwhelmed you. But the mastery of how feeling flows through you is only complete when it no longer depends on external conditions or other people. The final stage of becoming emotionless in the disciplined sense is emotional independence, the ability to regulate your inner state without outsourcing control. By now, you have learnt to observe sensations, pause before reaction, scale intensity to importance, and remain neutral in motion. Emotional independence integrates all these skills into identity. It asks a deeper question. Who are you when nothing outside guarantees comfort? Most people unknowingly tie their stability to validation, approval, or predictable outcomes. Praise lifts them. Delay or criticism shakes them. Emotional independence relocates your center of gravity inward. You still desire recognition, but you do not need it to survive. You still feel disappointment, but it does not define your worth. Your baseline moves from fragile dependence to self-sufficient stability. Connection remains valued, but it is no longer compulsory for peace. Self-validation is critical. Your actions are measured against internal standards: honesty, effort, integrity, learning. External recognition becomes bonus rather than lifeline. Similarly, tolerance for solitude strengthens independence. Silence is not threatening. It is a training ground. Sitting with your own mind without escape proves that discomfort is survivable. You learn that urges, anxieties, and negative thoughts do not demand immediate reaction. Endurance of this kind, in small, safe moments, prepares you for larger challenges. Boundaries reinforce independence. Emotional neutrality alone is insufficient if internal limits are ignored. Boundaries protect psychological integrity, saying no without guilt, yes without obligation. They prevent silent resentment, Align external behavior with internal truth and reduce friction. Detachment from outcomes further stabilizes the system. Life remains unpredictable, delays, criticism, mistakes, yet your stability is portable. You navigate uncertainty with patience, adapting instead of collapsing. Adaptation replaces control as the primary strategy, allowing courage to emerge naturally. Action is driven by principle, not fear or compulsion. Emotional sovereignty results from these practices. You consult emotion as an advisor, not as a ruler. You feel fully, yet retain authorship over behavior. Decisions are deliberate, aligned with values rather than chemistry. Setbacks are instructive, not identity. Success is appreciated without inflating. Emotional weather passes, yet your internal climate remains steady. Others notice your composure, reliability, and quiet influence, a stability that attracts trust without force. Ultimately, the original desire to become emotionless is revealed in its true form. Freedom. Not numbness, but freedom to feel without fear, to care without captivity, to experience life without being dominated by temporary states or unpredictable circumstances. Emotions still rise and fall, but they inform rather than command. The nervous system is no longer hijacked. Responses are intentional, proportionate, and aligned with self-defined principles. Calm is not silence. It is mastery. The journey completes when emotion is no longer a chain, but a current flowing through you. You are present without surrender, engaged without overreaction, and human without being consumed. Emotional independence does not erase feeling. It structures it, giving depth without volatility, strength without rigidity, and freedom without isolation. And in that freedom lies the final reward, the ability to live fully, steadily, and unmistakably as yourself.